This is Brandscience, the YouTube edition.
Nice work.
Unbelievable!
Sponge and pockmarks gone fast.
The election in the United States raised a lot of eyebrows as it exposed huge gaps in ideologies and a serious defect in education. But more importantly, it shone a bright spotlight on moral disparities and how individuals use social media to drive their particular truth. It goes beyond party preference and veers into issues like anti-vaxxing and anti-masking as they relate to personal freedoms. Here in Canada, I've watched friends who I previously thought were more altruistic rail on in their Facebook accounts about the, in quotation marks, myth of coronavirus and how the numbers weren't real. How could they possibly stray so far off into left field? This sort of false narrative is commonly attributed to social media. When one person has a crazy opinion, they're deemed crazy. When several get together, it breeds bravery and creates a false legitimacy of their misguided beliefs. The world is flat because I have 20 Facebook friends who agree with me. This takes us to today's interview with Dennis Garces. He's a social digital entrepreneur. Let's hear and see the interview now. All right, with me today, a gentleman who has a lot of accomplishments. We've got 2 paragraphs worth of stuff. You've been a very busy guy, Dennis.
Maybe.
The Globe and Mail, Billboard Magazine, RPM, Rolling Stone, and AllBusiness.com have all sang your praises. You are a serial entrepreneur. You've been involved in several startups, several successful companies and private acquisitions. Also, the reason that you and I sort of crossed paths is that we were both in the music industry at some point, and you much more than me. I was just the idiot that played the records. You were the guy that actually promoted and marketed. And you worked with Polygram, Universal, Sony, BMG, and Somerset Group. And that's a conversation I want to have with you as a separate conversation, possibly even a separate podcast, your involvement in the music industry, because it has changed so substantially. And you and I go back more years than I care to admit in terms of what the industry has gone from and to. So I hope we can talk about that as a separate issue on another day. Today, I want to talk about your involvement in social digital marketing. One of the things that I was very curious about was your participation in Rock the Vote, which was a non-partisan venture. Can you tell me a little bit about Rock the Vote?
Yes. Well, Rock the Vote is an initiative, as you just said, a nonpartisan initiative in the United States. With the basic premise is that they're looking to get young voters to register and vote in the U.S. elections. One of the things that has been long recognized over the years is that young voters have not participated in elections, and one of the things that they think is an important element is having people's voices heard. And so it started. I started a number of years ago. I got involved with it, and my colleagues got involved with it back in 2008 for the first time, and as well as in 2012, just around the U.S. elections. We weren't available for 2016. We were tied up in other things, so we weren't able to participate in that one. But having had the experience in the last the 2008 and the 2012 U.S. elections was helping young voters register was I want to say quite a humbling and proud moment in my career.
Well, what takeaways did you take from that? Did you find that there was a large young population that were not making it out to vote? Obviously, AT&T felt that was the case. Is that what conclusively showed up after this campaign?
Well, one of the things that really struck me, and this actually came from some of our teams that were involved in creating content for the social component of our campaign. We sent out teams to go not only participate in the Democratic and Republican national conventions, but we also had, because we were involved, Rock the Vote involved itself with a lot of recording artists. And recording artists were doing a lot of things as well to encourage the vote, to get young people to vote out. One of the examples that sort of struck me as one of the most memorable ones. We had one member of our team go on the road with the Beastie Boys for, I think, almost a month on their tour bus or traveled with them. I wasn't sure if it was their tour bus or he was on an adjacent media bus. He never really told me the full story, but basically he was on tour with them as they were at the colleges and universities throughout the U.S. And he recorded them, again with all their activities around Rock the Vote, encouraging young voters. And the thing that struck me when we were looking through the raw footage was that people. The connection to pop culture, obviously, one of the reasons that Rock the Vote was so successful is that it was able to leverage its the celebrity or the connectivity that young people have with artists and with music, and be able to start a conversation which maybe for many had not been had to that point, and it got them engaging and participating in issues. And I think that was something that really struck me, and with artists such as the Beastie Boys, I will say that, whether you're a fan of their music, whether you think they're just a bunch of silly guys who just, got away with being silly and making money. I'll tell you this, they were very passionate. They were very engaged, and they really brought a connection, in a lot of ways to that key target, audience that really Rock the Vote was about. And I think that some of those interviews and some of those activities in which you'd see them engaging with college and university students really resonated with me, because it really indicated to me that their message, which was falling, I don't know if it was falling on deaf ears or was not being even paid attention to, was brought to light because of people like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that some of the music personalities out there, their involvement in politics, and some of these people that you would think would be the last people who would be politically involved. And you look at, what was the guy's name? Motor City Madman, Ted Nugent.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yeah.
And,
Very, very much so. Ted and the NRA are very well entwined.
yeah. And the other guy who he was married to Pamela Anderson for a while, Kid Rock.
Kid Rock, yes.
Very politically involved, but I think both of those guys are a little more right-leaning. And I mean, you think rock stars.
Yeah, but then you've got, and again, this is stuff I learned at the DNC and the RNC. So Latino artist Daddy Yankee was a Republican. I learned that Rage Against the Machine hated everybody, but was extremely. They participated in both conventions, by the way, not in a good way, not in a supportive way to either one of them. But again, talking about extremely educated individuals who wanted to articulate, their displeasure or their, support of certain issues. You've got people like Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, guys like that. There's a lot of not only opinionated, but I'm going to say educated in politics, musicians and artists out there, and I'm not going to demean artists who aren't, maybe. I'm not saying that you have to have a political science degree to have an intelligent thing to say as an artist. I mean, you have to be passionate, and I think you have to have something to believe in. I mean, that's why even artists like Taylor Swift, are out making statements right now to their fans, and I think, and again, not trying to be partisan one way or the other, but obviously, trying to highlight issues, which I think is I think it's any celebrity, I don't know if it's a responsibility, but it's definitely something that's very important to them.
It's also a calculated risk because Taylor Swift is obviously heavily supporting the Democrats, and she is in with both feet. She's really going hardcore, and good for her for being politically involved and taking a stand. It's easy to sit on the wall and watch the money come in and not really commit to anything. So good for her. I read that Obama, and again, you and I talked about this beforehand, and you don't purport to be an expert in political social politics, but I do want to get your opinion in terms of the extent that you have been involved. I read that Obama in 2008, he excelled because of his team's mastery over digital and social. And John McCain did not have the same understanding of of the importance of this. He was too busy dealing with his vice presidential candidate and some of the things that he was juggling at the time. But tell me about Obama and his digital team, and what are your thoughts in terms of, was that a key reason that he won the 2008 election?
You know what? Again, I think digital. If digital was to ever say that it made its debut in a meaningful way, it was 2008 in the U.S. election, and social became not only a new force, became a substantial force, and to some, based on their opinion, might have been the deciding force in the election. And I do believe since then, whether you talk 2008, 2012, and even I will say 2016, social has made, and digital and communication through that platform and those mediums has made a significant impact, to the point that, yes, I mean, you could say that television still can make that same kind of effect and change on an outcome or an election. I certainly believe that social has earned that, and is definitely entrenched in that same level of meaningfulness.
Yeah, you remember the story, of course, the first television debate. It was Kennedy and Nixon, and they said that Kennedy was a television president and Nixon was not.
Mhm.
And Kennedy obviously beat Nixon that year because Nixon was perspiring heavily and he didn't look like a president. And that was 1960, and now we go ahead to 2008. Now here we are in 2020, and we're looking back over the last 10 or 12 years on the impact that Twitter and Facebook have had on products and candidates. Can you give me your thoughts on Twitter and Facebook, and both of them playing a prominent role in digital persuasion? And I want to get your thoughts on what influence Facebook and Twitter have had in the past couple of elections in terms of digital trolls and so forth.
Well, when I think of those platforms, and I think of the term and the way that people describe technology, and technology is, neither good nor evil. It's the way that it's applied. And when I look at those again, they're mediums, they're channels. They're just channels in which have been able to garner large audiences, and because of that, there's eyeballs and ears paying attention to them and to the messages being conveyed on there. So it's the ability, for, whether you call it technology and bots and or companies and bad actors, or even good people, to be able to get their message across. It's about finding a way to cut through the clutter, to get heard, and to find those audiences in which not only are they going to hear your message. The key difference between a lot of other mediums, whether it be television, print, etc., and social media, is social media works on the same premise as I like to call the most powerful form of marketing, which is word of mouth. Social works in that same way, except it's accelerated by technology. And when you accelerate it by technology, you allow, obviously, to reach that larger audience, but at the same time, it's the same thing as riding a bicycle. If you tweak your steering wheel just a little bit off, and you're going 2 kilometers an hour, okay, you'll wobble a little bit. If you're driving a high performance sports car and you do the same thing on a steering wheel, you're dead, because the car just wilds careerly out of control. Same thing with social. If the message gets picked up in the wrong way, things can wildly careen out of control. And I think it's so important that people understand that everything that they see, I mean, whether is not necessarily true. In fact, I think the ability, and I think the mistake that a lot of people make right now is that they're looking at they're looking at things, the hearsay and the conjecture, to the same level as journalism. And we need to understand that there is a difference between journalism and hearsay. And the problem is right now, hearsay is guising itself as journalism, and journalism is under fire to be and accused of being as hearsay. So both are under, one is under attack, and the other one is posing to be something it's not, creating a lot of confusion with the audiences. So very powerful tools, can be used for good. Hoping it's being used for good, but we've also seen it used for the wrong purposes as well.
It's interesting you say that because we look at digital brands right now in terms of the people who are controlling them. Just up the street from me in my neighborhood here in Leslieville in Toronto, there are posters, uh, and they call it information and media theft. And they've got a giant picture of Mr. Facebook, and they have these captions. And there is actually a group out there right now that are trying to gain some sort of momentum in terms of going after Facebook and getting them to be more arbiters of truth. Jack Dorsey of Twitter
Mhm.
started tagging Donald Trump's questionable posts with "get the facts"
Mhm.
and linking the sites with accurate information pertaining to his tweets.
Mhm.
Should governments impose controls on various aspects of this? I'm curious myself. What do you think about governments getting involved, like the CRTC did with radio and television, where they oversee all the content that goes out there? Right now, the internet is still a wild west. Anybody can post anything with virtually no control. What are your thoughts about the government getting involved and being a bit of a filter?
It's a dangerous. I mean, again, you can liken things to being Orwellian in 1984, and being over policed. But at the same time, as you said, a wild west and self policing, is not also potentially a solution. It's a difficult one, quite frankly, and you know, I would like to hope that society as a whole would be able to self-police. But what has only emerged is that the extremists seem to get heard on both ends of the spectrum, and the moderates, get crushed because their messages aren't controversial or exciting enough. We live in a world of sensationalism right now. We live in a world where when you stick out, that's when you get noticed, good and bad. And the moderate messages get lost or get viewed as old school. So it's a difficult thing right now. I do believe in the basic premise that I call it being a human being. Of being, you can have different opinions, but be kind. You can have different. You can disagree with someone, but not be hateful. And to me, it's not really about a law. It's to me about a sense of morality, or a sense of realization that none of us are above reports, or none of us are above making mistakes. But people should have an opportunity to be heard. That's one of the compelling things about social. It allows, and it has made. I mean, look at we think about YouTube stars. We think about social influencers. We think about young mothers who've been able to generate and create incomes for their families, um, by expressing their opinions. Those are wonderful things and wonderful products of social. Unfortunately, too, there's that same. It also gives the same platform and same um, place to be heard for hate and for other negative messages. So, again, as I said earlier, it's not the technology which is evil. It's the people that make those decisions, based on their moral or lack of moral compass. And it's difficult because at what point does it start feeling like censorship?
Mhm.
I think having different points of view expressed within a conversation, or within a forum, or within a platform, I think is healthy. If we all agreed with one another, then there probably wouldn't be a need for social, because we'd all know what each other was thinking. But in this term, I think as long as we abide by the levels of code of conduct of respect, and not fostering hate, opinion is opinion. And for that, I don't believe governments should be censoring or controlling that.
Mhm.
As long as
You've
the
got a very generous opinion of the nature of mankind.
I'm hopeful. How's that? I'm hopeful.
Somewhere between what you're saying and the reality has got to be a place that we can all get along. Jack Dorsey, as I mentioned, started tagging Donald Trump's tweets. What would you think about? I'm just spitballing here. What would you think about Facebook and Twitter and major social platforms putting some sort of filters or something attached to it that basically fact checks everything that goes out? So that, and I'm going back to this anti-vax movement
Mhm.
that was on before COVID, and now I thought people would know better. And now I'm seeing a movement to talk about avoiding getting vaccines for COVID-19, let alone for common flus and all the other things that the anti-vaxxers have an issue with.
Mhm.
This is obviously, some would say this is an opinion, and they should be allowed their opinion. I suppose they should. But again, they're calling up facts from sites that have a definite vested agenda. And I'd like to see all of these articles from these obscure news sites that they pull up. I'd like to see every article vetted in Snopes or some sort of filter site,
Mhm.
so that we're dealing with facts.
I guess the question is, and this is, and I'm not saying that I agree or endorse anti-vaxxers. In fact, I recently watched a show, I think it was released a few years ago on Netflix called Pandemic, which there was a section on anti-vaxxers, and it made me crazy. I'm going to probably sound smug and maybe to the upset of some people based on their opinions, but I'd like to think that anti-vaxxers. Well, I think there'll be a bit of social Darwinism happening with that eventually. So I'd like to like to put that out there, but I think in all seriousness, the challenge and I think the difference between having an opinion, you and I can have different opinions. You can like red and I can like blue. That's an opinion. But if my opinion puts your health at risk, that's not an opinion anymore. So
Mhm.
that's where I draw the line. And I think when you think about things like that, but the problem is, and I think when you talk about Jack Dorsey and fact checking, it's a dangerous and slippery slope. And the slippery slope that I worry about in those kind of situations is, listen, fact checking, absolutely, things should be fact checked. At what point do you draw the line? At what point does all of a sudden you state something and someone wants to feel that the fact check it should be the other way as well, that the quote unquote popularly regarded traditional science, all of a sudden Chinese medicine is going to contradict some of the stuff that traditional Western medicine has, and we need to fact check against that. What is the benchmark? Because I still think there's still going to be a disagreement on what the benchmark is going to be to check against.
Yeah. Um, Again, I keep calling back to Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg, who neither one of them are saints, but it seems like Jack Dorsey has a bit of a conscience. But I think the bigger dilemma is that Mark Zuckerberg refuses to acknowledge that Facebook is a media outlet. For him, he's saying we're just a delivery platform, and people upload stuff and have at it. Now, he is pulling some things down recently that were advising people to gargle Drano and ridiculous things like that, which they did feel some moral responsibility to pull off of their platform. But it does seem like Facebook wants nothing to do with politics or anything that's going to draw them into a responsibility that could affect stock prices. Meanwhile, Twitter does seem to be a little more involved in terms of taking a stand on things.
Well, I think the challenge that Facebook is facing, and when Mark says that he's not media, I have to some ways agree with him in the sense that he's not. Facebook is not. Well, at least to me, the understanding of what Facebook is a platform in which you can express your material, your content. It isn't a content creator, like a news broadcaster or a media outlet, so I guess so to speak. So in that way, I think that's the line he wants to distinguish himself. He's they're a channel on your social media dial that you can tune into as you can with Instagram, as you can with LinkedIn, as you can with Twitter, and it's a method to receive information from others, not their information. It's not Facebook's information. I think the challenge is that people don't understand that it's not Facebook's information when they get it on Facebook, and that's where the confusion lies. And that is a significant difference. And I think that's the distinguishing. I think that Mr. Zuckerberg wants to make. But Jack, I mean, again, I don't know him personally and won't speak to his moral compass. But I have to say that when something is stated which is potentially dangerous to a population or to a people, not being able to to uh, to put a flag on, or at least point out to people that there's something that you should think about before completely swallowing something whole. It's commendable, but it's also potentially, again, dangerous to the point that it could result in fact checking everything, and then
Mhm.
that potentially being, that intent being lost, in all of a sudden that every tweet is fact checked, even the ones which, quite honestly, to all of us may be obvious.
Mhm.
So anyway.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is outlandish on my part, but I would just like to see a disclaimer on Facebook somewhere that is evident. So when you sign in, please note that the posts have not been verified. Please make your own opinions and form your own judgments based on research, and that some elements have been posted on this medium which we cannot verify the truth. That to me would be one small step towards hopefully educating people to know that just because it shows up on Facebook does not mean it's true.
And Tim, and as you called me generous earlier, I'm going to say that you're very generous to think that that will actually affect people. I would believe, and I would potentially, without even knowing this as a general fact, I would probably believe that's in the current terms and conditions of Facebook. It's probably in there. I mean, how many of us have read it? Probably next to zero. Um, I bet it's in there.
As your role as a entrepreneur
Mhm.
and the companies that you've been involved with, um, tell me about how you were able to essentially have your people go into social environments and change the conversation. We talk about the influence of social media, and we see a bunch of posts, and they kind of take things into a direction, and people their tempers are inflamed. Somebody had a bad experience, and they start vetting on social media about a particular company. Tell me how your experience in the past has been able to regenerate and change the conversation in a positive way.
Well, again, a lot of the work I've done has not always been about changing the conversation. What we like to do, and the process that I've been involved in through social, has been really taking branded content from a client and really finding the places on in social where in which people are already having discussions about that brand, that topic, that community of interest, and they're having those conversations in the sense that they're looking to find out more information. They're already thinking that this is something that's of interest to them, and they're looking for more content. That's the kind of space that we provide the content in. We and especially for our brands, we don't like to drop content on behalf of brand in any volatile social environment, especially even, for example, I mean, if somebody even didn't like their competition, say their competitor brand, we would never encourage a brand to drop into a hostile conversation, even if it was about their competitors.
Mhm.
You know, we have been involved in brand situations where brands have had their own level of controversy, and we put content up, and someone has responded negatively, to those situations. But we found, and this is the part of social which sometimes makes brands uncomfortable, but it is the way the social works. Um, you have to. It's a platform, as we said earlier. It's a platform for people to express their opinions. In the cases where we've had, people express negative, I can say probably in the 15 years I've been doing this, probably less than 1% of the campaigns. No, actually, in all situations, except for less than 1% of the campaigns, where in which the community actually responded and supported the brand. Um, and before the brand could even respond, and I'm talking about, we've been in situations where we've had someone post something negative. We went to the brand within the hour, talked about a strategy, went back to post something, and realized the community had jumped to the defense of the brand.
Wow.
So that's the wonderful thing. I mean, and again, that's when you start out in a situation or a forum in which people are already talking positively about the brand, or the general category that you're talking about. You're not finding the naysayers. You're looking ultimately, and how our process of marketing has always worked, leveraging social. It's not about us having 10,000 people who seed content everywhere. It's about knowing exactly where the right places to have these conversations, to see this content, to start the conversation, and ultimately let the consumer and let the fan and let the advocate of that idea, that product, share it with their friends.
Hmm.
I think you and I are old enough to remember a commercial which the saying said, "I told two friends, and he told two friends, and so on and so on."
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the premise that we work with.
Yeah.
That's how amplification and content sharing happen. I mean, that's how things go viral. It's not because a company spends millions of dollars, seeding this everywhere. I've always believed that a message cannot go viral if no one wants to share it. And a virus needs a host.
Yes.
So so in order to spread. So I know it's
Very
very
true.
maybe given COVID-19 maybe not be the best, but it's accurate.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's interesting. We look at social media and think of it as this newfangled way of marketing, but social media is basically just an extension of public relations.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned word of mouth being the most powerful sale tool. I know from experience with the brands that I've worked with, our most powerful selling tool, bar none, are testimonials.
Hmm.
People who have successfully used said product or service, and we're happy to post about it. Uh,
Exactly. And that's really what. And if you think about what are micro influencers, what are nano influencers, what are influencers, in general, they're people who are saying a positive thing about a brand or experience, and they're sharing it with their quote unquote friends. Now, the definition of friends has changed over the years. We had the pleasure in one of there were companies I was involved with very early on, um, in a survey which a large company was doing, and they were asking questions, about social and technology, and we were allowed to put one of our questions in it, and the response was really eye opening for us. And the question what we asked was, how many friends do you have? And what we really learned through this, and we did this survey, I think in 2006, 2007 is when we participated in. It
mhm.
was already, and I think of those, that was still fairly early days in social. That the average person, and I'm going to draw it off my memory, so I might be a little bit off on some of the number breakdown. But the
We'll
average
fact check.
person
Don't worry.
had 54 friends.
Wow.
Six were close, 10 to 12 were acquaintances, and the rest, this was the most shocking insight for us. The rest were people they'd actually never met in person.
Hmm.
So, which really spoke to the power of social and what a quote unquote friend is. And
Hmm.
when someone makes a friend, and if you think about it, I mean, maybe your different social platforms, you have different levels of connections, but how many friends do you have on LinkedIn that you are truly someone would know in a very personal way?
Yeah.
I think we utilize and that term friend now, even in Facebook. I mean, there are people who are probably closer to you and people who are more acquaintances. You would call
Yeah.
acquaintances in the old school term.
Yeah.
But I've said this, and why I think social influencer marketing and amplification is such a powerful tool is because it's now getting a recommendation from a friend. And I say this: how many times have you made a decision based on travel decision based on a recommendation from a stranger? Most people say, "No, I haven't." And I said, "Well, you ever used TripAdvisor?" Yes, you
Hmm.
have. Have
Yeah.
you ever made a decision going to a restaurant based on a recommendation from a stranger? No, I only trust my friends. Well, I guess you've never used Yelp.
Hmm.
All these things, all these platforms, we are listing what are Google 5-star reviews? What are all these things? These are recommendations from friends or from people who we believe are trusted within our community.
Hmm.
And if you think in that term, the redefinition or the expansion of what the term friend means someone who's a person of influence to you.
What surprised me over the last few years is Instagram and how integral it's become in the hospitality industry. I went out with a friend. They finally opened up the farmers market at Brickworks here in Toronto last weekend. We went there, and everything was all fenced off, and everyone was masked up. But there was this one older gentleman who sort of approached us at the fence, and he asked us, how did we know that the market was back on? We said, well, we saw it on Instagram. And he said, Instagram, I guess I should figure out more about that. And we said, well, you don't have an account? No, but, my granddaughter's going to set something up for me. It was delightful because it was so old school and he was so unsophisticated. But literally all the restaurants, the bakeries, all the places that we're interested in, we follow on Twitter, and we find out when they're reopening. We find out what's on special and the new closing hours. All of that communicating through one social medium. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, and again, I think depending on the category and food, I think hospitality is one of them. What the phenomenon now is, we all take pictures of our food. In fact, we take pictures of our food before we eat it, which means the food, the visual stimulation seems more important than the actual satiation, which is kind of amusing to me. But if you think about it, that's become a cultural thing. So that sort of whether you want to call it food porn, whether you want to call it creating that an image of your lifestyle that you live, apparently, because you go to these fancy restaurants and eat this wonderful exotic food. And it almost becomes an extension of your personality or of who you are as a person,
Yeah.
Hence why I'm very careful on who follows me on Instagram, because I don't want people thinking, that, oh, this is all he does. He only eats. But you know what I mean? It does become a reflection of whether you want to call it of status, it becomes a reflection of image, of PR in a lot of ways, of who we are as individuals.
And how people can use their social accounts to basically paint their personal brand.
Create their own reality.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate your time, Dennis. And I would like to have you back to talk about the music industry. I think that's a topic all unto itself.
Oh, yeah.
And it'll give us both an excuse to feel really old.
Oh, boy. Are we going to start figuring out who we know? That'll be the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
That's right.
That's right. Interesting.
That's right. And here's the teaser. Dennis was involved in... was it Big Shiny Tunes? What was the compilation?
That one, Much Dance, a few of the big compilations Much Music did, yeah.
Very good. All right, we're going to talk about that in future, so come back and check that out. In the meantime, Dennis, thank you so much for your thoughts, and have a great day.
All right, thank you. Take care.
You've been listening to Brandscience Podcast, the YouTube edition. Remember to subscribe for upcoming episodes, and don't forget to comment below. The comments help us tailor future episodes to topics you'll enjoy. You can learn more about the podcast at brandsciencepodcast.com. Thanks for watching.